Welcome and thank you for joining us with Conversations with Ted. I'm Debbie Ausburn, a partner at Taylor English Duma, and I've spent more than 30 years working with youth-serving organizations, first as a social worker, then as a lawyer and criminal prosecutor, and finally as a civil trial lawyer defending and advising organizations. During that time, I've also worked as a volunteer, as a board member, as a foster parent, and I've written a book titled Raising Other People's Children, What Foster Parenting Taught Me About Bringing Together a Blended Family.
And I'm Tom Rawlings. It's my pleasure to work with Debbie on the Youth Serving Organizations team here at Taylor English. I've been a lawyer for 30 years. I've actually spent a lot of those years doing other things. I was a juvenile court judge. I was the state child advocate for the state of Georgia for the protection of children, and most recently, director of the Georgia Division of Family and Children's Services. So with Debbie's trial expertise and client representation expertise and my history working within organizations that serve children and youth, perhaps we can address a few things today. Today, we want to talk a little bit about, we've talked in our last two about what to do before a claim is made, how to respond to a claim with an investigation. And now today we're talking a little bit about what do you do after you've done the investigation? How do you follow up? How does it change your organization? So Deb, we have a few tips for them, don't we?
Yes, I think the first principle that we always recommend to youth organizations is to be as transparent as possible to the stakeholders. And this may be difficult after an investigation because you don't really know whether you're going to get sued over this or not. So sometimes you already may have been served with a lawsuit, so you know. Other times there may be that sort of lull while you're still waiting to see if you're going to get sued for a lawsuit. And it's very easy to get so focused on the lawsuit or the potential lawsuit that you start doing what lawyers tend to advise you to do, which is lock down everything, shut down all sources of information, and just pull up the drawbridge, count on your moat, and just stay inside the castle and doing nothing until everything blows over. That's really not an effective way to continue to run your organization. So we always advise transparency, as we've talked about that in the first and the second of this series. And now in this final series, we want to talk about the responsibility to keep being as transparent as possible. Again, you have to balance that with the need to defend yourself in a lawsuit. We're not recommending that you throw open everything because information does have currency in lawsuits. But you also have to remember and remind your lawyer that as an organization, you have a responsibility to clients, to parents, to other stakeholders that transcends or at least is as equally important as defending the lawsuit.
Whenever you've had an incident, it's not only the lawsuit you have to worry about. A lot of times you have law enforcement, child protective services, and licensing agencies. So how do you recommend you share with those entities and when and where and how the results of your internal investigation?
Well, again, a lot of this depends on what that agency is doing and where they are going with their investigation. The licensing agencies and law enforcement, they have the power to get that information. You really can't hide it from them. So you need to turn it over to them sometimes with reminding them of their restrictions, whether or not it's subject to Open Records Act request by other people down the road, for example. And so you always need to assume that this possibly could have a wider audience than just the agency that you're handing it over to. And you can always put restrictions on it, but you can be aware of what the law puts restrictions on it, and you can request that they treat it as confidential or as exempt from open records request, for example. The other thing about working with these agencies is sometimes if you can get in, you can negotiate or talk to them about, particularly licensing agencies. You can, by being transparent and by staying open and working with them, you can ameliorate whatever citation they're going to give you, and you can follow through with an appeal. And to the extent that you can maintain a good working relationship with these agencies and with law enforcement, that gives you more room to hear a heads up about what they're going to do so that you can be prepared to respond to it. Or sometimes you can let them know that you have taken remedial measures, and let this agency know that, or the law enforcement, that you are taking this seriously and you are looking for solutions of things that can be changed to tighten up your program.
And on that third issue, Deb, I think, it's so important that if you do the investigation, if you find things that it may not even be necessarily directly related to the incident, but if you find things that you can improve, then you need to show, for the sake of your organization, for your future business, for your current clients, that you are taking your responsibility seriously, and that you are remedying not only any issues that arose here, but you're also devising better ways to prevent things from occurring in the future. Are there any particular stories you've seen where a client did a good job, or maybe not a good job, of responding to their own findings?
Well, I have seen clients, sometimes they do make what I think is a mistake of, they get some of these off the shelf programs and try to just impose those programs on their organization. And the problem is, those off the shelf programs are a great place to start, but you have to spend a lot of time taking them and personalizing them to your organization. For example, one very, very common child protection technique in volunteer organizations is the 2 deep rule that Boy Scouts have, which is you always have to have at least 2 adults around a group of kids at all times. Well, you can do that with volunteers when you're in a for-profit group where you have to pay people, particularly an industry that's a low margin. You can't always afford to have 2 adults with 3 kids in a classroom, for example. So that is the sort of thing that you have to look at and decide whether or not that fits with your budget and fits with what you can do with your program. And if you can't have 2 people in the room at all times, 2 adults in the room at all times, then you need to figure out how you can better supervise that one person who's in the room with the 3 kids.
So, of course, I want to thank everybody for watching this series of Conversations with Ted. Certainly both training and investigations, legal advice, perhaps, especially with Deb, some war stories. And we're glad to help you out any way we can. We appreciate you listening and appreciate your feedback as well. So thanks all. We'll see you soon.